It is noon on January 27th, and I call this meeting, special meeting of the Sunset Empire Transportation District Board of Commissioners to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance after you just sat down. If you can, if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. My last choking on those words right now. I'm sorry. I am too. Roll call, please.
Commissioner York?
Yes, here.
Commissioner Alecria?
Present.
Commissioner Montero?
Here.
Chair Clatsop?
Present.
Commissioner Romero?
Present.
Commissioner Teeple?
Present.
Commissioner Stolberg?
Present.
All right, any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we want to move to approve the agenda as presented.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second. Any discussion? This is your second chance of additions or changes. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Chair votes aye. Public comment. Do we have any public on? No public on. Any public in the room that has public comment? No public in the room. Okay. Review and discuss the fiscal year 25-26 budget. So before we open the floor to Kelly, I would just want to make sure that we are explaining what is going on to those of us that have just joined the board, wondering, scratching their head why we're having a 25-26 budget meeting. Tried to emphasize that or explain it a bit in the email that you received with the budget information. At the passing of this budget at the end of last fiscal year, the board at that time committed that the board would review fiscal year 25-26 budget during the first quarter. We are well past that first quarter. We had a lot of things happen during the first half of the year that didn't allow us to have this review session, so we are having it now. So that is the explanation as to why it's at this late date and why we are reviewing the budget. There were some questions as to whether things were properly budgeted and whether the budget was properly set up during the last budget committee meeting and then during the last meeting where the budget was approved. This is our opportunity to go over to see if the budget is in alignment with where we are, whether things are placed properly, whether we've discovered any errors that need to be fixed, whether there needs to be any budget amendments that we need to do now to make sure that our budget is clean moving into the next budget cycle. Is that clear to everybody what we're doing here? Okay.
I have a quick question. So those issues that you just made an inference to have been corrected?
Well, we're going to have Kelly.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing. That's what we're looking at.
All right. No, I really appreciate that we're doing that.
Yes. I think that this might be a good practice just to have a more in-depth budget checkup in the middle of our year and going forward, just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. So, yeah. Kelly, take it away.
Presentation. This is also a nice step into our next budget season, and getting ready.
Before you start, please refrain from asking any future budget questions. We cannot discuss the future budget. We can only discuss the budget we are in right now. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so fiscal year 26 budget review, post-adoption budget. So this was a special board meeting. The purpose of this meeting, as Kathy has said, was to review our fiscal year 26 budget in response to the board direction, provide context regarding compliance and structure, and allow for board discussion. Staff does not recommend any budget amendments at this time. The majority of our board members joined after the budget adoption, so this is a great time to be able to kind of come together and just review and really see where we're at. It provides the shared context for oversight responsibilities from the board. Our budget review was done, we had our auditor review our budget prior. It was approved by our budget committee and moved to our board, and then it was then approved by our board under Oregon budget law And it's our current budget that we are using right now to continue through fiscal year 26. I know my presentation, but wow, that's small. So we use state forms when we do our budget. Those are the forms that the state of Oregon provides for us. That helps with consistency and compliance. Our budget officer takes annual budget law training, and I have taken that training for the last 5 consecutive years. How our budget is used during the year. Our budget is what authorizes us to expend money. It guides us for our daily operations, and it supports our service. So without our budget, we don't exist.
Just make an interjection. I'll be taking the Oregon budget law training in very soon.
Very soon, yeah. In years past, I know
February.
I've sent it out to the board members when it's available. I think it's a great thing for the board to sit in on and to take.
I would ask that continues, that the
Yes.
board be invited to take that. So further education on budget training is always a good idea.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they offer an online, you can do it online. Sometimes they offer it in person. I have yet to make an in-person one, but I do take the online one. It's usually broke up into 2 or 3 different sessions in order to get all
When
the
does it
through.
occur?
It should be starting February, March. I haven't seen anything come out on it yet. The state puts it out. So
And
but as
the-
soon as I do, I'll send it out.
And the one that you do for the board is based on the training that you receive from the state.
Yes,
So,
yes. And then, yeah, like Kathy said, I will do a training in April. And that is based off of all the information that I get from the state when I do that training. So, yeah, the state training is great. And some year I'll get there in person because I think it's better. We monitor our budget every month. I present to the board the financials. We have our budget to actual on those financials, which has been amazing to be able to look at that throughout the year and see kind of where we're at. It allows us to monitor our variances and trends. And then if we ever get to a point that we need to use contingency, we'll do that when that's appropriate. We hope to not, but it's there if we need it. Our budget format and methodology follows state Oregon requirements. We have a beginning fund balance that reflects the estimate of the time of the adoption of the budget. Restricted funds and interfund transfers are tracked. And contingency, like we talked about, is budgeted to address the unknown. Our board has a rule or a policy that in order to transfer money out of the contingency fund, it has to come to the board. So that has to be board approved in order to use any of those funds. State reporting. So our district is required to submit our budget to the state annually. We do that, and we have not received any notice of non-compliance or any correction from the state in regards to our fiscal year 26 budget or any prior budgets that I've been a part of. High level, our total resources are approximately 4.9. Our expenditures are aligned with that. Our budget, this is just an oversight for us. So we're going to address compliance, structure, assumptions, and oversight today, and discuss to be able to support efficient financial oversight during the fiscal year. So that's what today is, to kind of go over, to look at, to see, to question whatever there is there. This meeting will fulfill the requirement that we had in order to do our budget review. And the adopted budget provides the framework for your oversight and monitoring, and then our future planning going into fiscal year 27 and forward. So that's what I have.
Okay, so I hope you've all had an opportunity to look at the budget and that you have at least a basic understanding of how a budget works. I had Sarah include our latest financials in our board packet for this meeting so that you had an idea of a reference point for where we currently stand versus what the budget was. And so I'd like to open the discussion on what our goals are, what you may have noticed, what questions you might have about the budget, and to start the conversation, Commissioner Romero. And Kelly, why don't you come join us up here? I think that you're actively going to be involved in the conversation.
You pick up all my pieces here, sorry.
My question is pretty simple. It's a point of clarification. When I was studying this, can you tell me what state mass transit payroll distribution means?
That is a distribution that we get outside of STIF, and it's based on where your district is within the state. We get those payments quarterly.
So that's the payroll tax that the legislature passed? That isn't the mass
Separate
transit
one.
payroll? Okay.
I thought that had to do with the number of employees
Oh,
in
that's
your
right.
district.
Yeah, that's right, the total employees in our district.
So that's a perpetual payment that happens every quarter?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the STD tax.
And does that amount vary
No,
or
it's
it's
not.
not pretty fixed?
It varies because it's based on numbers.
Commissioner Romero, can we remember we're speaking at the microphone,
okay.
not to the person next to you?
Okay.
It does vary. It's pretty, I've noticed over the years, it stays, pretty close to the same amount, but it does vary a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions from commissioners regarding the budget?
Contingency plan is not on the budget.
It is not, it's
I mean,
footnoted on the
fund,
budget.
contingency fund, yes. Thank you.
So that was one of the big questions while this was, the budget was going, budgeting was happening last year, was the contingency fund and how to account for it on the budget. Could you speak to a little bit about how we account for it potentially differently than maybe other districts do?
We have our contingency fund footnoted on our budget. It is on the requirements page for the general fund. And it's just a footnote at the bottom that says, put my glasses on. The contingency fund of $933,326 is maintained in a separate bank account and is subject to monthly oversight by the board of directors through the financial dashboard presented at each board meeting. Pursuant to board policy, no disbursements or transfers from this fund are permitted without prior formal approval by the board. So we footnoted that, and I sent that to our auditor when we did that, and he said that yes, we could do it that way.
And for new members of the board, what you should know is it doesn't matter that it's board policy, it's a state law.
What is the state law?
That no contingency funds can be used without approval by the board. That's a state law.
And just for
Commissioner Tebow.
just for clarification, that's the one that we are buying a CD for. So
We're not buying a CD, it's just in a money market account. The contingency is in a money market so that we can earn interest.
okay, it's money
Bigger,
market.
more interest than we were. It was, right, it's in a money market so we can, but we changed the type. That was what we did
Money
2
market.
months ago, we changed the type of account.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I will voice some of the concerns that were voiced previously about the way that the contingency is being accounted for in the budget, just so that we're transparent about part of the reason why we're here, was that if the contingency is being tracked outside of the budget, we have no real tracking mechanisms for the state, how the state is concerned, for that money and where it is and how it's accounted for in our budget, because it's outside of our budget. It's not in here. So how do other districts handle a contingency fund? Because this was the first time that I'd seen it handled this way.
Yeah. Each district is their own and can handle, they can use their own forms, they can budget as much as they want to budget. Oregon budget law says that we only have to do personnel services, material services, and capital outlay. So how each district budgets is up to that district. As long as they're within Oregon budget law, it's up to them.
And just to clarify, every district has to use these same forms.
As far as I know,
They
when
have to
they
use an LB11,
submit
an
them,
LB10,
Yeah.
an LB30,
you have to use those forms,
and
yep.
so.
Those are what I
There's
submit to
no
the
option,
county.
yeah. Commissioner York.
We have a pilot
a board-approved policy on that, or do we have board-approved policies on other financial matters?
I don't believe so.
I'll just say, as we're talking about other, other jurisdictions may do things in other ways, and I've been on several budget committees or elected bodies that are part of the budget committee, and the ones that I can recall all had a series of financial policies passed by the governing body that said things like the contingency fund is handled this way, or other issues that people might have a concern about. How is that done, and how would I know coming in? How is that done? There is a mechanism to consider those things, and say the Corvallis City Council, we annually maybe went over those policies and reviewed them and discussed them. Always helpful especially for new members, and having a clear written guideline for how and why we do things that may be discretionary.
And that,
Commissioner Montero.
that is one of the reasons why we have a policy committee, because we are very aware that we need to update our policies. And our finance policies are under the 800 series of policies.
Okay, so, and I will say that in my recollection, when I was on the board prior to this time, contingency fund was accounted for in the budget, and it was clearly allocated in an unappropriated fund area so that it was set aside. It was not something that we could just use until it became something that we were declaring the use for, because there are requirements for contingency fund monies and how you can change them from contingency fund to something else. So I would say that this is a valid conversation for the board to be having, and for the board to potentially be asking more questions about in budget training classes. Commissioner Montero.
And I would concur that this was a major reason for uncertainty about the budget last year, because, for those of you who don't know, I was the one who was most uncertain about the budget, and I was the only budget committee member who voted against the budget. And it was a lot to do with the contingency not being accounted for in the budget as a budget item, as I have been used to for 15 years on the Seaside City Council and on all the other budget committees that I have sat on in the county. There's a difference between contingency and what's the other type of fund? Contingency means you might be able to use it during the year, but
Reserve.
Reserve. The reserve. If you put money in your reserve, that means you do not intend to use it that budget year at all, and that it is being reserved for the next budget cycle. That is one of the key points of many budgets of public bodies.
Commissioner Allegri.
Just to add a note, you can't use the contingency budget if you've not calculated your budget to cover your expenses. So it's really, not really, it is for unforeseen situations. For example, a possibility which may occur is that this is just a drastic situation, get no federal money. And so then you could use the contingency. But if we didn't have enough money in a certain line item, the contingency fund is not available.
So the way that the contingency fund is in our books right now, even if something like that were to happen, we couldn't use the contingency money without passing a supplemental budget because that money
right.
is not in our
It's not in
budget
our
at
budget.
all.
Right.
It's not there, which means that we can't do anything with it. It's like it doesn't exist at this point. And so that is why it's important to have it actually be part of the budget. So you can have it in there and you can, because we'd have to move it into the budget before we could even talk about using it.
We would have to do a supplemental budget, even if it was listed in the budget, because we would be using it outside of what it was, where
It
it
would be
was.
a one-step supplemental budget. This would require 2 steps.
With
So-
the same, yeah, he would just do, but, I mean, yes, we would still have to do a supplemental budget.
Commissioner Legria.
And the other reason is that in previous situations, previous times, the contingency budget wasn't visible, shall we say. And so now we know, 1, there is one, and 2, that the amount. So it's not buried anywhere. And that's what was some of the discussion is you have to know how much your contingency is. You know, if it's only 100,000, well, you know, good luck in financing things. But that's why some of this has discussion occurred. But I'll just mention this because it bugs me. Okay, so I have compiled a list of all the jurisdictions, not all of them, but most of them. And they all have contingency in a separate line. And what I've never understood, and maybe I'm just thick, is that I think we have 900 and something plus contingency, and it's listed, it's not listed here. It's the amount, maybe I have my numbers wrong.
It's on the general fund page, the requirements,
Page what? Requirement
9.
9.
It's on the bottom in the footnote.
That's what bugs me.
It's not, that means it's not in the budget.
That's what we're talking about. Is
I
that-
know,
yeah.
but nobody else does it, and it's not, people don't read footnotes. I mean, I guess because of past experience and situations that occurred with the contingency fund, I'm very leery about it being hidden, and that's all I have to say.
Commissioner Teeple.
So I would want to rephrase that as the contingency fund is not a resource because it's not coming in this fiscal year, correct?
Right.
That's what our resources is income that's coming in.
Or what we had on hand left that rolled, yeah.
Or what we had left over, and so if other districts list it as a line item, they would have to also list an expenditure of that amount, correct?
So what had happened when we did this is I did not list the contingency as an expenditure. It was not listed as an
Right.
expenditure, which Tita noted at our second board meeting. In order to list that contingency as an expenditure, I also needed to list it as a resource because it was not listed as a resource. So and then there was debate about it being listed as a resource. It is not in that opening fund, $400 and some $1,000. It was, we couldn't come to an agreement as to how that would move forward. I can't list it as a requirement if I don't list it as a resource, because then you don't balance.
Right.
And so that was where the footnote came in. It was decided that we would put it in as a footnote because we couldn't come to a conclusion that made it balance and made sense. So we decided to put it as a footnote.
Commissioner Teeple.
There's a thing in accounting, you've got the profit and loss, which was income and expenses, which is basically what your budget is. But then you've got your balance sheet, which shows your assets. And
Right.
that's like the money that's got sitting in the bank, the funds that's got sitting in this contingency fund. And that doesn't go into the income and expenses. That's those.
I just want to say that I understand all of the sides of this and that this is complicated based on past practices. I also am hearing that the board is leaning towards wanting to clean that up so that it is trackable, it is in our budget, it is on there listed. So, what steps do we need to take to make sure that in this upcoming budget cycle, we have the contingency fund in our budget, not as a footnote?
I will put it in our budget, not as a footnote, as a resource, whoops, and as an expenditure.
I don't
Commissioner Montero.
understand putting it as a separate resource rather than including it in the line of available cash on hand.
An available
Yes.
cash on hand is where it would go, because it would not be a separate resource.
No, it's not a separate.
Right, no, it's not. It's not a separate resource. It's available cash on hand.
Right,
So that's
because
where
we're
it would go.
pulling it from the previous
Exactly,
year.
yes.
So would
Commissioner
the
Labrio.
figure be for available cash, the figure for contingency funds, or would be other money in that
There
figure?
could be, yeah.
Well, that's the problem. If you, what I'd like to see is the specific amount of contingency. Main thing, that's all I'm saying.
So,
Do you-
do you want to clarify that, or do you want me to throw my understanding of that in first?
You throw your understanding
Okay,
first.
so
and
my
I'll go from
understanding
there.
is that we're looking at, we're talking about the top line is going to include the contingency fund as a resource. However, it's not going to be as a spendable money
No,
because
I
it's going to have its
understand that
own thing that says, this is contingency fund. So it separates back out.
So the money, the amount
Mm-hmm.
of the contingency fund is there.
It drops back out into a
You can
contingency,
see it, you
yes.
pick up your piece of paper and go, oh my word.
Just like those, just like those.
Okay, thank you,
Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
got it.
Commissioner
And
Montero.
When you've got, let's say you have $100 in your contingency fund in this year. When you set your budget for this year, and you have other monies, that $100 goes into this year as cash on hand. And you can reallocate it at that point. That doesn't mean you have to put $100 at the bottom for contingency again. Because you've got that money that is, it's like working
Each
capital.
budget, each budget
has a
time cycle, you get an
different set.
opportunity to
Yes.
address that money again.
Exactly, exactly.
I've always understood that it rolls unless you have board permission to move it.
Well, yeah, the budget meeting
Yeah.
would be the board approval
Permission.
to change it.
Right.
You just would have to, if you decide to change, if you decide to move money out of contingency, you would just want to make sure that that is very well noted and
Exactly,
approved as a
part of
motion.
the budget
Yeah,
presentation.
That's part of the budget
Yeah.
process.
yeah.
I called a question.
We don't have a
We don't
question
have a
to call.
question.
Well, I thought I'd try that, I've never used it.
It's only if there's a motion on the floor.
Nice try, though. I appreciate the effort of trying something new.
Think ahead.
Commissioner Romero.
Just to clarify in my simple mind here, I'm not a mathematician or an accountant, but it sounds to me that, okay, contingency is not a resource, but it's a separate category of its own, right?
It shows as a resource and then it shows as an expenditure
Okay.
in order to balance. But you're not really expending the funds, you're just hanging on to them for later.
You're expending it into the contingency.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's in it, when you're saying expenditure in that sense, it's categorizing it as contingency. So that's the translation of that word there.
Okay.
Whereas other monies that we would use out of resources would be spent on projects and operations and things that we need to do during the year. This one's spent to fill our contingency fund. Does that make sense? Those words helping people as far as resource and expenditure?
And the intent here is to make sure we keep track of that and not lose it in the mix.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Commissioner Teeple.
Is there an advantage to show that our budget is for 4.9 million versus 5.9 million? Because that's basically what you're, oh, there is. Well, then yay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Any other discussion or questions for? We've all reviewed last year's budget. This is our opportunity to make any comments or questions. This is a meeting, not a work session, so we can make decisions. That was done on purpose in case there were decisions that we wanted to make during this meeting. So far, we have made no decisions, and we've not asked for any, not given any direction to staff for changes going forward. Commissioner York.
Well, then I'd like to go back and have a little conversation about the policy issue. I haven't seen the policies that we have, but just again, in my experience, those are really important because this discussion about why, how do we show contingency and why do we do it and why did we change, rather than being based in a discussion on memory. Well, the last person did it this way, and that. You have clarity about how you do it. And you have clarity when you're ready to, and you want to change it. You have a record of the old policy. So what policies do we have now? And yes, I appreciate the reminder that we have a policy committee. Do we have an approach to looking at our budget and budget processes that would help us say, it's fairly easy to pull out a policy and say, let's talk about it and maybe we'll make changes. It's a lot harder to say what's missing. What don't we have policies that we should have? So have there been discussions or thoughts about how we ensure that we have financial policies that make the interpretation for new commissioners a little easier, that make changes in staff or other changes on the board, those things easier? Has this been discussed in the past that this maybe isn't adequate for the need and security of our operation?
Commissioner Montero.
I think I want to defer to you. You have more historical knowledge on that. I was going to make some other comments.
So I will answer your question in general. In general, the board has not looked at the policies in a way to say what's missing. In the past, they've in general looked at the policies that are in existence and said, how do we make these better? Which sometimes has resulted in new policies. However, an overarching really look at where do our policies stand with current requirements, legislation, past practices, things like that, really hasn't occurred in the recent past at the very least. So the job of the policy committee is fairly large at this point in time. We have, as a board, very much relied on internal staffing policies and internal staff and direction from the director to determine how we proceed, which has been successful sometimes and not so successful other times. So I think that the board discussing that and bringing up that, hey, there's two different ways of looking at this is extremely valuable, and that I think that we should proceed carefully, meticulously, and in collaboration with our staff to say, hey, these are times when we have questions and we're not sure how to proceed because there's no policy, because we need clarity, because the board hasn't had any specific direction that they've given. Keeping in mind that the board has one employee and can have policy that is in regards to one employee. However, how we handle our finances is a different thing. We're not giving direction to staff, but our policies can help guide how those things go. The board also has to choose their budget officer. Determining who their budget officer is there would be great if there were some guidelines and actual policy around that, rather than it becomes budget season and, hey, the board needs to decide who the budget officer is. Who should we pick? So some policies around that would be a great idea. It really sets the parameters, makes it a lot easier for new boards, new staff, new people in the outside world to see, well, how do they do that? Do they just randomly pick a name out of the hat, or, you know, what's the procedure there? So all that to say, yes, the policy committee needs to be looking at all of those things. In my opinion, the board needs to give that direction.
So they also, again, in my experience, it's common, I wouldn't say it's always happens, but it's common to have two types of policies, board policies and administrative policies.
100% in there are.
And it's problematic, and I have experienced this, and I really mean problematic, when folks say, well, our policy is blank, because you need to know the level of authority in those. And having those two levels, which are often like policy this and administrative policy this, aligned, so the board policy can be a little more general. It is our intent to meet the standards of blank, and then in this particular area, and then have an administrative policy, often, not always, but often, doesn't require board approval. It requires the executive director's approval, and that is more detailed, that gives more detailed guidance to staff. It is under the authority of the executive director, but it's not private information. It is still public information, and the board can look at it and say, wow, those don't look like they align to me, our policy and the administrative policy. That's not the intent of going there, but the intent is more keeping that separation of the board's policy responsibilities and the executive director's operational responsibilities.
Commissioner Levy or Commissioner Romero? I'm not sure which one had their.
I was going to go back to the budget meeting, if that's possible. Okay.
Is it about this policy discussion?
No, because I thought this was a budget meeting.
No, well, this
Can't
is.
do budget
no,
without policy.
So.
Well, you can't change the policy now.
No, I'm just saying that.
I thought we were talking about the components of the budget.
Yes.
And we're going
Pamela, the question that I'm asking is this in regards to this conversation we're having right now? Is what you're going to ask about this conversation right now? Yes.
Well, it seems to me that time is of an essence in terms of having a policy regarding our budget. And I know that the policy committee is meeting, and so I would encourage the policy committee to make this a priority, since it's essential in terms of our budgeting process, and we need a new policy.
Commissioner Stolberg.
That leads right into my question. Do we need to put forth a vote that we want to set this as a priority for the policy committee and address these specific concerns?
In order to have the policy committee address it, I don't think we need a motion, but we should, as a board, give consensus that that is something that we'd like the policy committee to consider as a priority.
Okay, because that seems like that would wrap this up for now.
Is that
Maybe
something
not.
Maybe not, but.
Commissioner Montero?
So I want to kind of jump off from what Commissioner York said, and board policy and administrative policy. The board policy cannot work in a silo, in a vacuum. Every administrative policy should in fact reference back to what board policy it is carrying out. For instance, the board policy, because everything that Commissioner York said is true. And you can't have a policy committee just working in the vacuum and saying, well, now we need a policy about this, or we need a policy about this. The practice has been in the past to look at what's available, and we do not have current board policies, and board policies guide the actions and the intent of the board, which then we pass on to executive director. I think that as we work on anything, as this board works on anything, at the top of our head, as we're looking at things, do we have a policy on that? What's the policy on that? Because that's another way you develop the policies, and you develop the groupthink and the historical pathway that people who come after us are going to need. What our new commissioners have received and the packet that the board policy committee at this point can deal with is right here. And I think that as we work on the budget, we need to be saying, do we have a policy for that? And then you have to remember that even if we come up with a policy and the policy committee puts it together, brings it to the board has to approve it, but then it still needs to go over on admin for them to do their administrative policies and procedures.
How is it implemented?
Yes, how's it implemented? So it isn't something we can do overnight, and we may not have for this budget, but it needs to be a high priority. And at some point, I mean, when you're, as I'm looking at the work here, we can start at page 1 and go through it, or we can say what's the most important and put them in order of what's the most important for us to have. And I think that's some work that the policy committee needs to bring to the board. The board's going to make the decision what's the most important. Obviously, I think budget is very important. Can we get all that done before we get into budget season this year? I don't think so. But I don't want to throw cold water on stuff. So that's where, I'm trying to tie all these pieces together.
So I would say that what Commissioner Montero just said is very valid, that creating all of the financial policies that we would need as a board may take longer than we have running up to our budget. However, it could determine some best practices that we want to see coming forward. And it doesn't change whether the board wants to direct the policy committee to consider financial policies as a priority. It doesn't say you have to have them done before this budget. However, having that work in progress will, let's just say, prime the pump that at least 3 of the people on the board will be actively discussing best practices that they can then share with the board. So there's the question on the table whether the board is, asking the policy committee to consider financial policies a priority. We don't need a motion, we just need everybody to kind of either agree or say, nope, I think that should be something else. Commissioner Montero.
And I would add to that since we have 3 new commissioners who are being oriented, that's the right word, part of what you're oriented to is you're being given what the policies are right now. And I would ask that you read them with a questioning mind, and that you send questions to the policy committee about what does this mean, or why don't we have a policy on this? Because you're bringing new blood and new eyes to everything, and that's very, very important.
So everybody nodded that the financial policies are a priority for the policy committee? Okay. So to wrap this part of the conversation up, I would also just say, please take advantage of the conference and all of the budget discussions and opportunities that you will have to ask budgeting and financial questions at the conference. There will be many experts there. Please don't hesitate to ask questions in those sessions. Commissioner Allegria.
So on page 46 of your packet, Commissioner Romero has contacted several experts in Oregon budget law to review the budget and expressed concerns regarding methodology.
Montero,
not Romero.
Oops, sorry. Oops, I know. Okay, never mind. Apologies.
The most beautiful names.
Okay, means Rosemary. Okay, regarding methodology, possible errors in computation and presentation, statement of the beginning fund balances, counting of restricted funds, treatment and reporting of fund transfers and ending fund balances and contingencies. So, how do we pursue this?
what page are you on again?
46, that'll be the red. 46, it will be under June 26th draft board meetings.
So Pamela, what is it? What's the question that you're
The
asking?
question is, okay, from what Commissioner Montero has said, I'd like to know what the problems are with all these.
So she was pointing out issues that she saw during the budgeting process and the budgeting. And so these are the minutes that have not been adopted. Have these been adopted yet?
Well, I'm
What
not,
meeting are they
Yeah.
from?
June 26th.
June
They have
26th.
not been approved or adopted yet.
So where does that?
Those should say draft on them.
It is.
It's
The
the
budget hearing, so yeah, they wouldn't be adopted
No.
until next
Just-
year.
Does it say draft on there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what does that mean? You can't bring it up?
No, I'm just saying that these have, they're
Yes,
they're unapproved on whatever
Okay.
minutes, because there's some other errors in there as well. So your question is, what do we do about the things that Commissioner Montero brought up?
Right.
Okay.
And the experts that she has contacted.
Okay.
So we haven't addressed those as far as my understanding is.
So, Commissioner Montero, do you want to respond to what your concerns were and how you feel now, and whether your questions have been answered, or where you are with all of the concerns you raised at the end of the budgets, at the end of the budget meeting, the last budget meeting?
Can I read that? Okay, so I was bringing concerns to the budget committee because I had done homework and had reached out to other people who I know are experts in Oregon budget law and Oregon budgeting forms, and not one of those experts told me that this was a good budget or an accurate budget. So those were my concerns. And I had also posed a whole list of questions about details in the budget. By email. I think I sent an email that I did not feel I had satisfactory answers to. And bottom line, that's what took me to the position where I did not vote in favor of the budget, because I did not have confidence.
So the statement that was made during public comment at the board meeting, which led to the commitment to review the budget, which is what we're doing now. The questions that were raised largely were the accounting for the contingency fund and how the back and forth happened, and another budget meeting was required, and then it was canceled, and then so all of these things are coming back to my recollection now. However, we've had further conversations now regarding how we want it handled in the future. We haven't taken any action to make or request any changes, but we have had opportunity to watch those budget items. I haven't heard the question so far today being asked as to, are we in alignment with our budget, or do we need to make adjustments? Haven't heard anybody ask that. Where are we? Are we going to end the year without needing to adopt another supplemental budget? What's going, those types of questions would be great to ask right now, because those are the types of things that, were concerns at the time the budget was adopted. Commissioner Alegria.
Now, this is just information that I read on the fly out the door about rural transportation funding. And so it's from Moody's, and there's possibilities of diminished funding, and we have to take that into account for next year.
But
we can't talk about
I know
next
that, I know that, but just since I saw it on the fly.
Yep.
And something to consider, because you're not going to solve it in a day.
Right.
And maybe looking over these numbers will also help in determining where we are.
Commissioner York.
Gee, I have a question. Could we have, from the executive director and finance manager, a quick overview of where we are in our budget plan? Are we over, under, big trouble, little trouble?
So if you looked at last board packet, it does show us in percentages where we are for the year. Some are highly expended, 80-some% for our capital. But we bought our buses already, so we don't have any future expenditures, so that's not of any concern. We have some that are at 15% expenditure. They're concerned only in that we haven't made those procurements yet. So where part of that is the uncertainty in funding. It's been a roller coaster for the last 6 months, and that doesn't seem to be slowing down. We expect to prepare our budget very soon, as we want to have that initial draft, because we have to look at a number of other dynamic factors that will come into play. And so we're going to have a base budget. We're going to have a budget based on this contingency, that contingency, and other contingency. When I first got here, we had the Alamo plan. So if we don't get any more funding, we're going to go to this minimum amount of service, and we're going to have one bus or two buses, and that's going to be it. So we have that spectrum that we're planning and preparing for. So it's not as simple as a normal. You look at your normal percentages, you can say, okay, that's where we are for the year, we're good. Because of the inconsistency in projecting future revenues and future income, there's a lot of uncertainty. We still want to spend 100% of our budget, but if there's carryover, we have an amount of carryover that we can use. We have we're doing an amendment to our STIF plan, which is a state plan, that we can do. We're going to put those pieces in place, look at the budget, but we're going to assemble a budget with a different crystal ball than we've had before. Because typically you'll get your federal money, you'll get your state money, you get your property tax, all these things flow. But all that stuff's being called into question now. So we're going to basically come up with our basic budget and when we talked about it this morning, we're pretty much on track with a few items that we have to adjust. And we're going to go through that in the next couple of weeks to make sure we're on target.
For this year.
For this year. And then the future stuff, there's, well, only that we're going to plan for.
The question that I perceive was asked was, how are we in relationship right now to the budget that was passed? We're not talking about the future. you're telling us a lot of things that you're planning to do, but how are we right now?
Well, as I said, in relationship to our current budget, we are trying to look ahead to see what that looks like. Our current budget, the way it's constructed, we're fine. We're going to spend that money, we're going to be under budget, we're going to have some carryover, and so we're trying to find that right balance for that. Otherwise, with only one or two line item exceptions, we're performing where we expect to be.
So,
Commissioner York.
go ahead.
Can I ask the question, can I summarize what I think you're saying? So typical practice is we're going to think ahead about worst case scenario and best case scenario and try to do a budget that is aimed at the middle and make some adjustments if we're off track a little bit on one item or another, and sometimes they cancel each other out. You know? And so it sounds like you're saying that where we are right now is, it looks like we're going to come in pretty close to that middle target, and we have some adjustments to make and some more information. We are thinking a lot about how we apply this knowledge to next year, but for right now, it looks like we're going to land the plane pretty much where we were planning on. Is that fair?
Yeah, we're spending within normal parameters. We expect to be at the end of the budget term within that range.
Okay.
Commissioner Montero.
So, we have a couple, when we met for our board meeting and saw the financials, there were a couple line items that were, I'm going to say, grossly over the budget in terms of on the expenses side that I can remember. And so I'm going to inquire as to my previous experience has been that typically when you're that much over the budget, what you didn't do was lay out your expenditures across the year in an adequate fashion. Maybe you put all your expenditures for the buses in September, but you spent it in March. And so I'm thinking about, do we need a policy that talks about in our budget, we put our expected expenditures in the month we expect to spend it, so that when we're looking at the budget, we are actually looking at, this is what we really expected to spend, and this is what we really spent. Not, oh, well, we expect to spend by the end of the year yet this much, but we spent it all here, so until this month, we're going to be over budget every single month. Does that make sense to people?
Yes, and I would, if I may, I think that whether we need a policy or not is a question that the board can address. However, practice, I know from looking at the budget and from hearing the answers from our financial officer when people ask that, is that it is practice to do that. And we are reliant on funding from outside sources that we don't get to control when the money is actually released at times. And so when ODOT promises money during the last calendar year, but it doesn't actually come until this calendar year, or those kinds of things, federal funds don't arrive when they're supposed to, we don't get to account, we can't after the fact then adjust the budget. But those types of things are the things that we should be seeing in our exceptions report and explain in detail every time until it zeroes itself out, so that it's not, we've way overspent versus underspent in a category, so that we have that explanation in writing in front of us when we're reviewing those things. Yeah. So again, the question of whether we need a policy around that will be the board's decision of whether they want to adopt a policy around that. And it has been the practice to try and direction from the board in the past to make the budget not just evenly split over the year, but to where it's supposed to be allocated for which month. Is that correct?
That is correct. Can I say one more thing? So like if you look at the capital expense, so when you're looking at the year-to-date actual to budget, that is telling you where we should be within our budget, right? We should be about 50%. And you're gonna see capital expense is gonna show almost 93%. And the reason why is because we expended that money in October. So that's going to continue to show that way until we get to the point in our budget where we would be 93%.
And that's exactly what I said.
Right, but the only way to not do that is to have not purchased those buses until the end of the year. Because the year-to-date actual is where our budget should be, right? We should be about 50%. But if we ordered our buses came in, we had planned to expend that money in October. We expended that money in October. And so we expended according to our budget, but your year-to-date doesn't show it
Your
that way.
overall year-to-date
I
percentage,
understand
yes.
all of that.
Yeah.
When did the money come in for the buses?
October.
Okay, so if the money came in for the buses in October, and we spent the money in October, I don't understand why we're at 92% over expenses.
We're at 40-some% over expenses because the budget is not at 100% in order to be. When we get to the end of the fiscal year.
You were only talking capital, and I was keeping it at capital.
Right.
Okay, so if we got the capital money in October, and we spent the capital money in October, then the capital expense should not be 92%, it should be.
The expense and the resource are they're on different lines within. So you're gonna see the resource for that.
The resource should go into capital, if it's
It is
capital.
capital purchase right here. It's line number 19 on page number 19. This is November's. It shows that we received those funds. And then on your expense, it shows the same, that we expended those funds. And so this one shows that we have, for capital purchase for our resource, that we've received 80%, but we should only be at 50%. So it's flopped.
But our expense still says 92%.
Right. And it will until the end of the year. I mean, it will, that won't change.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think to help is, if you're buying gas throughout the year, the first month you're using a 1/12 of it, then another 1/12 every month, and it accumulates over the term, and you can see that if we're at 50% because we're halfway through the year, that equals out. But some things, the expenses occur at the beginning of the year. And so when you buy 4 buses at the beginning of the year, for $750,000.
But you got the money for the 4 buses at the beginning of the year. So if you get the money and you spend the money all in the same month, you shouldn't be over budget.
They don't show on the same line.
What line they show on, doesn't matter, it's capital expense.
We have, 60 items that we have a line item for, and the form just shows projection for a 12-month period. I think some projects, such as capital, could be separated out and show when they're at 100% complete. So in October, we got the money, we bought the buses, it's 100% complete. So there's you could do something like that to show those kind of expenses. We talked about it this morning because it's a simple depiction of that. We would have to build multiple models for different things, and we don't want to do that. So the simple depiction is, we got the money, we spent the money, that project's closed. So maybe that's another way to say it, this project's done, so we're at 90% because we're completed with the project.
So I think that part of what's going on is that the capital, the items that, the line item that you're looking at, capital expense versus capital income, incorporates a lot of different things that landed differently. So it's not identical things that are landing differently. And so I appreciate that the capital purchase line item is 80% and the capital expense line item is 92%. The problem is the different landing of the different things in there. And for me, if I looked at that, and one of them was at 92% and the other one was at the expected amount,
I understand.
then I would be like, what's going on here? 92 and 80% is pretty close, especially when you're talking about, you know, those kinds of dollar amounts and the size of the expenditures that happened versus.
And I understand all that, but don't tell me then that the reason for it is the purchase of the buses, because it's not.
It's more than that.
It's everything else.
Yeah, it's more than just.
Because the money was in the bank, we spent the money on the buses, but there's still, we spent another 18% or whatever. So don't tell me it's because of the buses, because it's not.
So I would add,
So
this is unusual, in that we got the money at the same time we got the buses. So there was no money in the bank when we bought the buses. We got the money in the same month we got the buses. That was deliberately done to coordinate our receipt of the bus and payment of that. So I don't know how that's reflected in here any different, but it's an unusual one-time thing. If you look at the rest of the line items, they tend to follow a course or a pattern. Some things are taxes and subscriptions and stuff, and we tend to pay those at the beginning of the year. And some things are like fuel or expenses, and they fluctuate throughout the year. And so each thing will have its own rhythm and its own timing. The bus was a one-time procurement of 4 buses, and through a coincidence or whatever we did, we got the money the same time we got the bus. So it looks.
And when did we expect to get the money? What month did we put that in as our expected income?
We didn't know, because we didn't know when we were going to get the buses. It's a reimbursement.
So where did you put the money? You had to put it in some month in order for it to accrue.
I think it was put in through the year.
So you divided it up in 12 pieces? Which is, you never, ever want to do that unless you know you've got those expenses every month.
We had to guess.
We had to guess, and I think we put it in October because that was when we had planned that it was going to happen. We had hoped that that was the way it would work.
So if it was in the budget in October, and it was received in October, and it was expended in October, then the reason for the overage is not the buses. It's something else. And that's what I want to know is, what was the something else?
Why do you think it's an overage?
They're saying the expenses are 92%
Of what they expected.
of
Of what we expected for
for
the
the whole
entire
year.
year.
It should only be 50%.
No.
Are you looking, no, because
where she
what's at the top is that we're at 50% of our year, which means our income should be 50% of what we expect, and our expenses should be 50% of what we expect.
Except for the fact that they all came in. So that 92% is going to stay 92% until the rest of the year. It's going to be 92%.
Not if you're budgeting.
Not if you divide it over 12 months.
No, I wouldn't divide it over 12 months.
What would the percentage, what do you want there? What do you want to see?
You want to
50%?
be as close to 50% as possible, because you're at 50% of the year.
But if they spent 100% of their budget, how can they just say, well, we're only at 50%? Because they spent
Because it should have been
100%.
put into the budget. They just told us.
So,
That money was put into the budget for that month.
but
They expended.
so here's the way I visualize that.
Yeah.
So when the money is in the budget to purchase a bus, let's just say a bus. Okay, so we're going to buy a bus. It costs $100,000. So in order to buy that a bus, you have to pay that $100,000 all at one time.
Yeah.
The budget doesn't account for that year-to-date year-to-annual isn't going to account for the fact that you spent it all and you had to pay for it all at once. So you're not going to pay any more for it. You're done.
I understand that.
So that number stays there all the way through. Like, it
100%.
really shouldn't change at all. Like, all the way through the year. If we spent less than what we budgeted for it, what less than was on that line item, then all the way through to the end of the year, once we spent that money, that dollar amount doesn't change. Because that dollar amount is that dollar amount to year to date. So it's not compared to the rest of the things, it's just compared to the calendar, this is how
It's
much we
year to
budgeted
date. And
versus
what
to the
we're-
budget.
But
So
what we're being told is that the money was budgeted in as being received.
It
by
doesn't
that
change how
time
much
as
we
well.
have allocated to spend on it.
That's not, no.
In the profit and loss, it doesn't change what we had allocated to spend on it. Doesn't change.
Well, I'm not talking profit and loss.
What the numbers that you're talking about are profit and loss. That's the report that you're looking at. So in the expenses, we budgeted to spend the $100,000. We spent the $100,000. In theory, if that's exactly what we spent, the year-to-date would be 100%. We're done. We're not spending out of that line item anymore. It's all covered, it's over till the very end of the year, when everything then also lines up to 100%, or whatever we end up at.
I'm not explaining myself well enough then. So, keep going. I think Commissioner York had a question a little earlier.
I mean, that's how I'm understanding it. You can ask more questions or clarifications at some, that particular one I do understand. It makes sense to me. And so please sit down with Kelly and make it make sense for you so that you can ask all the questions you need so that it makes sense.
Well, the question started with allocating expenses, allocating resources into the months where we think we're going to get them. And I totally understand, you can't predict if ODOT's gonna be late with a payment, and you can't, that kind of stuff. Just like you can't predict, you might have an extraordinary expense that you didn't budget for. And those are the things that you have to have the indicators to see what happened here.
Comments. So, Victoria, our AP payroll clerk, is an amazing spreadsheet person. So she puts together spreadsheets of our expenses throughout the year. When I do the budget and I sit down, so we write the budget as a whole, and then when I sit down to break it out by month, I take her spreadsheets and look at those monthly expenses that we expect to expend each month. I recall when Craig was here, he had asked why the expenses in December were in January were so much higher than December. We have, different things that come due in January, so that month had higher expenses than December did. I do my very best to take all of that information. She breaks it down monthly, quarterly, and annually for our payments. And so I take all of that and use it when I do the breakout for the month so that I can get it as close as possible. It's not perfect. It's our best guess scenario as far as that goes, but I do try really hard to get it as close as I can to what we plan to expend each month. And the same with the resources, those quarterly payments that we get, when I expect those to come in. ODOT has been amazingly fast with sending our reimbursements. So some of those I don't expect until the following month, and they're hitting in that month. So you'll see that we didn't get it we got it this month, but I was expecting it the following month. So those kind of off things do happen, but I do try very hard to make it as close as possible to what I expect that we're going to expend each month.
Commissioner York.
So what you're talking about right now is really the cash flow, making sure we have that, and we don't see cash flow in your reports, do we? Or did I miss that? Oh, okay, I missed it, but that's not in the budget page, that's a separate report.
Separate.
Okay, got it.
So, just remind me, when we're doing the budgeting, will you present us with a spreadsheet of our allocations by month for the different things?
I definitely can, absolutely.
That would be good.
Yeah.
I think that might help this discussion is if in that presentation we have not just the scrunch down budget of this is how much it is for the year, but the additional information of how, it's just how things are allocated. So the board has a better understanding of those kinds of expenditures and when we expect them to land.
Yes.
And then the board can chime in about, well, we kind of feel like, and I know that there's been previous discussions when I've been on a budget committee about utilities being budgeted, you know, to be the same one year as the next, when we've all been hearing in the news that utility costs are gonna go up and
Right.
the board asked for more money to be put in utility expenses, things like that. That helps that discussion so that we can actually look at how money is spent.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, fiscal year 25-26, the budget we're in right now. Any further questions or discussions? Do we have anything else that we need to ask? Commissioner Montero, did you get enough information and the ability to get more answers?
Yep.
Okay, we haven't given any direction, we've gotten more information. We're good with that? We don't want to give any direction to Commissioner Tebow?
The only direction that we gave is to put a line item for the designated or the contingency funds.
We haven't given that direction yet.
Oh, okay.
We've discussed it.
So do we need a motion?
Mhm.
I would move to make a line item in the budget for contingency funds as a resource and as an expenditure. 2 line items
Going forward.
going forward.
Going forward in the next.
Second it.
Motion has been made to create a contingency fund line item in expenditures and resources in budgeting going forward.
I have a question. When you say the line in resources, do you see it as a separate line item besides cash brought forward? Or do you see it being part of cash brought forward?
Your choice. I mean, I would put myself, I would like to see it as a separate line item, but perhaps there's a reason.
It goes in the cash coming forward, it all goes into one.
You can't subdivide it.
Oh,
No.
It's all the available cash on hand.
Okay?
But it does drop into, we can
It
put
does,
into.
it does have its own line item as an expenditure.
okay, so
Yes.
the motion is a separate line
Yeah, a
item.
resource and an expenditure. That's what the motion was.
Okay.
So the motion is for a separate line item, separate from cash brought forward.
Right.
Is that what I'm understanding?
That's
No,
what I'm
Can't be
understanding.
then.
That's
That's what
not what
I'm
the
voting
motion
on.
was. The motion was to create a contingent, to add contingency as a resource and as an expenditure. And it was seconded. Commissioner, the motion was made by Commissioner Tebow and seconded by Commissioner
So
Alegria.
this is a separate line item. Is that right?
This
Okay.
is the discussion. You can make that clarification or request for an amendment, but that's not what, there is 2 separate things that it's being created as, a resource and an expenditure.
Right, got that?
And
Discussion. Commissioner York.
This is not chiming in on that piece, but I just want clarification. We're talking about a reformatting for, a small, but a reformatting for this year's budget.
The budget's going forward.
We can't do this year.
Okay, so just
Yeah.
because we had
I
said
think
that,
that's
we could not talk about that.
We
Now
can't- We can't discuss budgeting, but how we want it formatted.
in the
Yes.
future, for the
Yes.
next budget. Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Montero.
It is not common practice that you do a separate line item for resource contingency fund. Because the inference there is, if you put that in your budget as a resource coming forward, the inference is you're gonna keep it at that same amount for the next year, et cetera. When you say cash brought forward, you're talking about, this is all of the cash, this is all of the resources that we had last year that we're bringing into this year, no matter what the flavor of that resource is. So I would say that that's not common practice or probably best practice to do a separate line for contingency.
Commissioner Legria.
I don't really understand where we're going here, but I thought the motion was, or the idea, let me just say, is to have the contingency fund as a separate item, the separate amount of money. So you look at it, the line item says $900,000, it's contingency. Didn't want it to be in carryover, because then you have commingling of funds and someone somewhere could pull it out and you don't know. So with the separate line item, which I thought we're voting on, is what I had seconded the motion. If it's cash forward, then I rescind my motion second.
Kelly, how did you hear the motion? And how will you handle it?
I heard the motion as a separate line item for resource and for expenditure, is how I heard the motion. However, as Tita had said, all of your funds that all of our funds that we have on hand now, which would include that contingency, would go in as available cash on hand. The other resources that you see on your resource page, those are all resources that we expect to receive throughout the year. The cash on hand is what we already have and we expect to roll over into the following year. So we would not want to show it as a separate line item because it's not new money. It's existing money.
That's right.
Okay. And I would amend.
Just withdraw your motion.
Okay, I'll withdraw it.
And then there, because then you don't have to.
Okay. Commissioner Legria.
Was there a way to just put contingency funds in whatever accounting language that is?
Okay. Point of information. The budget as it was adopted on line 29
With the footnote?
of page, 9. We have a line item that is called operating contingency. Why would we not put it into operating contingency when we adopt the next budget? It goes into the resources and we put it into operating contingency. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just wondering.
That's a requirement. That is not great.
What page are you
Where
on?
operating contingency is an expense. It is not a resource.
No, we would put it in the resource as
I know.
cash, but I
Yes.
think she's saying as an expense, a
Yes.
requirement. That's
You're
where we
you're-
would put that
exactly.
line item. That's where that fund would go.
Absolutely correct.
Yes, Kathy's right in that. That's exactly how that should read.
So then you have your place where it is called out separate. It comes in as cash available at the beginning of the year. Every year the budget committee gets to decide how much goes in that operating contingency, but it's called out. It's
Okay,
separate and
what you just said, every year, the budget committee gets to decide how much goes into contingency. So you don't say, oh, we brought 500,000 from contingency last year, and so we're automatically going to expend or put 500,000.
I got it.
Okay. That's another reason why, it's all the cash in all our pockets on the table. That's what it is. And then we get to decide, the budget committee and the board gets to decide, how do we plan to use that next year? And it's not going to necessarily be the same way we did last year.
Commissioner York.
Another option, since we're not talking about making an immediate change in an existing budget, is that at the next meeting, the finance manager and the executive director give their recommendation about how to move the contingency fund into the budget. It sounds like there are several different ways to do it, and you know the budget way better than I do. I don't speak for anybody else, but, and so what are the options you looked at? What makes sense to you? What's your recommendation? Which we may or may not take, but then you get a chance to give that a little thought.
Commissioner Montero.
If we look to move the contingency fund into the current budget, we have a budget, we have to do a budget,
Supplemental.
a supplemental budget. And I think what I'm hearing is leave things alone for this year because we're at the tail end, so to speak. But let's plan for what we're doing for our next budget year forward.
Is that a
And
motion or a?
there's been two
Okay,
different approaches. There's been suggested that we make a motion now to direct staff or to ask staff to come with suggestions. Those are our two roads right now. Do we have any action that we want to take?
I'm going to make a motion
Commissioner Montero.
that we direct staff to prepare our next budget and going forward. To include the contingency funds as available cash on hand in line 1 of our resource description. And what? Oh, well, and also, I just don't see why we have to direct contingency being an expense, because it's always an expense. You're always gonna have it as it's a standard expense line. Just like unappropriated ending balance is a standard.
So right now, I understand what you're saying. So we're directing it to be added in as a resource, which would require it to be added as an expense. So we don't need to direct anything regarding that. So as long as we're saying, get it out of the footnote and put it into the budget, which is what
That's
the
what I'm
motion is saying, the rest of it should follow.
Good.
Is that what everybody's hearing?
Yes.
Good, so we have a motion. Motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Commissioner Montero and seconded by Commissioner Teeple. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes unanimously. Anything else we'd like to take action on today? Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Any other questions or comments from the board? Staff? Motion to adjourn. Commissioner Montero?
Nope, I don't. I did that. Oh, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is made by Commissioner Montero and seconded by Commissioner Stolberg. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. It is 1:30 on January 27th.
Could I?